around the country baby boomer show, and one of the things that we decided to do is to close by just kind of telling a couple of stories. I mean, what it's like to be a comedian. Jan,
all fun and games, really.
Yeah, all fun and games. You know, for you it is, but Jan's probably never had a bad show, but I've had a few in my life. And have you ever had a bad show?
Well, we always like to tell horror stories. When comics get together, you know, you sit around and tell horror stories about what's going wrong, because it's really funnier than what's going right. And so we started out a little different. I started out in comedy clubs. I mentioned I was working for about 17 years. The first 8 or 9 were strictly comedy clubs, and did a lot of really hard gigs. Comedy clubs are really a lot of fun, but they don't pay very well, you know, so you have to do these things called one-nighters. Y'all know what a one-nighter is? No, not that. It's not a little racy here in South Carolina. No, it's usually a bar gig, like a Monday night when the club is dark. They'll bring the comics over and the bar will have a comedy night. All right, so you get to pick up a little extra cash and everyone's happy. Except the problem is that they're really hard because it's usually a Monday night and the bar owner doesn't tell people that they're going to have comedy. So they usually like switch off the Monday night football game and send you up. Yeah. Jay Leno couldn't do well on this, all right? And I had to do a lot of these when I started out because I just, you know, that's how you make your money. And I was in one place in, I won't say where, it wasn't South Carolina, but close by. And I walked into the bar during about noon that day just to kind of check out the room, and I saw my audience was already at the bar drinking. So that's a good sign right there. It's going to go well tonight. And the bar owner came over to me, and this big guy, looked like a bar owner, and he looked at me and said the funniest thing I've ever heard. He said, he looked around the place and looked at me and he kind of saw this disconnect and he said, "You ain't got any of them thinking jokes, do ya?" Like I was going to accidentally educate his audience or something. And with the bar gigs, the deal was the club owner, bar owner really didn't want to pay you either. So if you didn't do exactly 30 or 45 or 60 minutes, whatever you're supposed to do, he wouldn't pay it. So I had to stand up there for like, I think it was 45 minutes that night, and it was pretty bad. My thinking jokes didn't go so well. Went home and decided to get into the corporate market, so which has been great to me for the last 10 years now in the corporate market. Kent has started from a different angle. He started in the corporate market and then got into the comedy clubs. And we've both had some experiences in the corporate market that we wish to take back.
Yeah, like Jan said in her act, you always get the really bad introduction. You know, like, I hope he's funny. That's
they all died. Come on out now.
Come on out, you know. But besides having an accounting degree, I also have an economics degree. Toronto thinks I ought to study library science. I'd have the trifecta. But I was asked to be the closing keynote speaker for the Arkansas Mortgage Bankers Association. 400 bankers, every one of them looked like Mr. Drysdale on the Beverly Hills. Even the women, it was and it was ill-timed from the very beginning because it happened to be the week that Lehman Brothers collapsed a few years ago, sending our economy, into the worst recession since the Great Depression. And when I got there, everybody was just panicked. You could just tell. And the manager comes up to me and he goes, "Okay," he said, "we're going to make a change." He said, "We're going to cut your keynote from 90 minutes down to an hour. Because we've invited an economist from the University of Arkansas to come talk to the papers to tell them, This economist goes up on stage and he goes, "In 1929, bankers were jumping out of windows in New York City." He said, "My suggestion to you is make it 7 stories high." He spends 30 minutes just belittling these people about what they have done with our economy. He walks off, 375 of the 400 bankers walk out. I don't know if the 25 that remained are too stunned to get up, or if they took like a cyanide capsule. Because for the next hour, I got maybe a dozen chuckles. It was awful. You know Tim Allen of Home Improvement? Tim Allen says doing comedy in front of people that don't laugh is like being in front of a bad firing squad. They don't quite kill you. They just leave you standing there, And I'm not kidding you, I was looking for a 7-story building by the time I got out of it. But Paula picks me up at the airport and she goes, "How was it?" And I go, "It was awful, awful." I said, "You have no idea what it's like standing for an hour in front of 25 people with a stupid look on their face." She goes, "Really?" teacher. That's my story. One of the things that we also would like to do is we'd like to open it up to you guys. If you have any questions of us, we'd love to answer any questions you might have about
I want to
comedy.
get the guy with a couple with a 60-year marriage. I got a T-shirt for you.
Yeah.
That was great. 60 years.
60
Yeah.
years. Well, you're the white shirt in the back sitting by yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Y'all been necking in the back there?
So yeah, you guys got any questions? Anything? Yeah. How do we handle hecklers?
We don't, neither one of us get heckled a lot, but
No, we don't have an act where people want to scream mean things.
we get a lot of people that want to talk with us. I mean, and they're not being mean, they just like being part of the show. I had one this week. I was doing a corporate event, and I gave the lady a book because she heckled me. She said something that's kind of stupid, I don't know what it was. So I gave her a copy of my book, and I said, now read it. Don't talk anymore. And she kind of sat there. And then she said, she couldn't understand something I'd said, and I said, what do you mean? And she goes, you're nasally. And I've had a cold all week, so I went back and took the book back from her.
I figured out in comedy clubs, I did, because I said I started out there, you did get some hecklers, and they're usually drunk. They have to be really drunk for people to, and especially women. Even I can't go after a woman unless she's really drunk and everyone hates her. Then you can go after the heckler. I figured out that what I can do if a guy starts shouting at me, it's only happened a couple times, I do go after his wife or his girlfriend, because they'll get him to shut up. You start making fun of her and say, what are you dating this guy for? Why are you married to him? The guy usually shuts up pretty quick.
We don't get heckled a lot. In comedy clubs, you can take care of it. In a place like this, you couldn't.
Right.
You can be really, really mean in a comedy club.
And in the corporate world, it might be the drunk CEO that's heckling you, and you got a guy, let it win, or, okay, you signed the check, all right, you win, Mr. Comedian. Anyone else? What other? I was at Match.com, and
Here's the real story. Fauna's going through menopause, so she found a comedian going through menopause. So I get no break.
we met through a mutual friend, Frank King.
Frank King, good friend of ours.
And we just kind of started talking about our acts. We both do corporate, we both clean, we both wanted to kind of branch out and find some other venues, and we started talking about we're both baby boomers, and why don't we go after the baby boomer market, and because that's where our act usually appeals to, and
it's a good perspective, I've been married for a long time with children. Jan's single with no children. She's female perspective, male perspective. I tell stories. Jan's great setup punchline, great comedy tradition of setup punchline. So it's a good combination, and we work well together. Right, all of our stuff.
About all our stuff, yeah. Yeah, people ask, you write that? Yeah, we don't steal and.
No, and I had one thing I wrote for one other. Well, I wrote a line for a comedian. I wrote a line, and I thought it was funny, but I would never had the guts to say it on stage. And
We can't tell you what it is.
And so a friend of mine, I told it to her, comedian Frank King. I told Frank King, and about 6 months later he called me and he said, that line about whatever? And I said, yeah. And he said, could I buy it from you? And I said, you can have it. I'll never have it.
What's been fun is that, because normally, like I said, we're doing the corporate stuff alone, and so it's fun to work together, because then we'll come up with, here's a line, or here's an idea for a way you might want to go with that joke, and the same with me, and so we kind of bounce each other off, ideas off each other, and afterwards we'll be going out and have a beer to go, okay.
And that's the best part of working together, is because we can sit down together, and you have two people that you respect each other's writing, that you can help.
I'm really impressed. You don't think you have to have a cuss word every word.
Right, we don't cut, yeah.
We don't, and I think that today there are a lot of comedians that think, they use profanity as a punchline. But if you look at they think they are all going to be Richard Pryor or George Carlin. But if you look at Richard Pryor and George Carlin, you can take all of the profanity out of their comedy, and it is still funny. And today there are too many comedians that it's just not funny because
Punchline is a cuss word, yeah.
Yeah, and I was talking to Chris Rock 6 months ago, and he said that, and I think Chris Rock is one of the funniest guys that ever lived, one of the smartest guys that ever lived. But he said he tells young comedians today, write clean for the first few years. You can always add whatever you want later, but he said it really does teach you how to write funny, and that's what Jan and I both did.
Yeah.
It does teach you what's true.
It's harder to write
It is.
punchline, but I always tell comedians, be true to yourself, because you gotta do what you think is funny, and if that's who you are, and all you do is cuss and everything, and then, but you'll find a venue for your act. It won't be corporate or theaters, but it'll be somewhere you'll find some
It'll be comedy center.
one nighter. You can go to this bar you're gonna know. Is it true I make 75% of what he makes? Well, I usually get the check in the group, so I pay him a little bit. And then
I'm the accountant, so it is probably true.
I gotta check that. I don't know what your checks are like.
I got a funny story. We did a mailing last month. We were doing, this month.
Oh,
We were doing a mailing. This is stupid. And we did a mailing down in Florida, and Jan called me. She said, "How much do I owe you?" And I'm just in my head. I was getting ready to get on a plane. And I just calculated. I said, "Send me this much money." And I'm not kidding. I was sitting in a hotel that night, and I was thinking, that can't be right. So I actually sat down and put it down on paper, and it was like half of what I told her to pay me. I doubled it. I don't know what I did. And she goes, "That's why you're not an accountant."
I'm losing money on these gigs, man.
She's like, "Those are some expensive clothes." But she never ever said a word.
I wrote in the check. I'm sending it out. Okay, that was a little kind of expensive.
I was like, "You idiot." Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That I've worked with or that I know or that... Yeah, you know what? One woman I think is the funniest out there is Kathleen Madigan. She's on the Last Comic Stand Days. A friend of mine, but really funny. She's like at the level where if you know comedy a lot, you might know who she is. And she was Last Comic Stand Days, one of the judges. Really funny person. And I like John Panetta. And I like Jay Leno and Rodney Dangerfield. I always like the set up punch jokes. I did like Phil Stiller. I thought she was very funny. And I liked her more. I read more about her after she passed away. Really an interesting values that she had. He personally paved the way for women comics.
I think Paula Poundstone is one of the funniest people you'll ever hear.
Yeah.
I've paid twice to see Paula Poundstone. I've never paid to see a comedian. There was a question back there. Yeah.
He pays per joke. And I have stopped because about 3 years ago he got in trouble because the freelancers were non-union, and he has a writing staff that's union. But for probably 8 or 9 years, I was submitting jokes. You can send them to a fax, and then you get a check in the mail, and you call his assistant, and it's got a little number on it. And she says, "Oh, that's the water joke or whatever it was." But it was a fun thing to do, and I actually ran into his head writer in the green room at a comedy club in LA about a couple years ago, and I'd never met him, and I said, "Oh, Jan McInnes." He goes, "Jan McInnes? Oh, you're on the list of writers that we look at their jokes when they come off the back." So that was really fun. But I've written for radio for 10 years. I did 15 jokes a day for 5 other stations, and I wrote for guests on the Jerry Springer Show, and greeting cards, and you name it. I've written for it.
Jan's written a book called Finding the Funny Fast.
Yeah.
Finding the Funny Fast, about writing funny. Great book. You guys ever want to learn how to write?
Yeah. He listened. I like this guy. He took some notes. Over here, somebody had a question? Yeah. Any Obama jokes?
Those are very political.
No,
Actually, the one joke I had that I don't do was political, so that's probably.
I don't like politics. I just don't like politics. I started out writing topical stuff, news stories, and that's very hard to do an act and sustain an act writing news stories because the news is always changing inside and changing, doing stuff on kids and New York and all that.
Bill Hicks was a great comedian from Houston. He's passed away now, but he when the first President Bush was in, he hated first President Bush, and he just had one joke, one story, one mean stuff about President Bush. And when Clinton got elected, he said, "I was so happy, and then I realized half my act was gone."
I I decided I will vote for the person who gives me the best material. You know, so who's got the best samples? I can make a joke on that.
Any other questions? No?
Cool. We'll be hanging out back in the back after the show. We'd love to just come by and say hi, and we appreciate you coming out and supporting us in our little venture. It's been about a little over a year we've been doing this. So.
And please remember the Sound of Music is coming up. What's the date? What are the days?
October 5th through the 14th.
October 5th through the 14th. Please come back and support the Fountain Inn
Yeah.
Civic Center. Thank you guys for coming out.